Right, good evening everybody and welcome to Cabinet Meeting Rushcliffe Borough Council this evening. As you know, the meeting is being live streamed on YouTube and the recording will be available after the meeting on the Council's YouTube channel. In addition, under the Openness of Local Government Bodies Regulation 2014, other people can film, record, post on social media or blog from the meeting, and any such images and recordings are not in the control of the council. There are two exempt items this evening at the end of the agenda, and there's also a question from Councillor Walker relating to one of those items, so we'll take that question in the exempt section. So we'll move on to the rest of the agenda. Item 1 is apologies for absence. I think we're all here. Yep. Item 2, does anybody have any declarations of interest, please? No. Okay, thank you. Item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of November. Can I have your approval to sign those as true and correct record? All in favour? Thank you. Item 4, citizens' questions. No citizens' questions. So we'll move on to item 5. So item 5, opposition group leaders' questions. We've got one from Councillor Birch, but he doesn't seem to be here. So I will ask it on his behalf. So his question is to Councillor Upton: how many existing Section 106 obligations across Rushcliffe remain undelivered or partially delivered?
Well, thank you, Chairman. This council will shortly publish its annual infrastructure statement.
Sure.
Which will set out the position of all the Section 106 obligations. As I've often said, this council acts as the banker for third parties for many millions of pounds for agreed Section 106 planning obligations attached to planning approvals for infrastructure such as roads, schools and health, etc. The situation is constantly changing as trigger points are reached by developers and monies are released. To go through all of the obligations to identify how many have had no spend or part payments would take some considerable staff time, but it could be done should you so wish. For information, education Section 106s are now managed by the County Council as the local education authority. This afternoon, officers have informed me that there are no Section 106 financial obligations where the purpose of the obligation is no longer required, and that there are 3 where the purpose of the obligation remains partly delivered. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Upton. Move on to item 6, the renewal of public space protection order, and I'll ask Councillor Inglis, please.
Thank you. This report seeks the approval to amend and renew the Council's Public Space Protection Order for the General ASB, also known as a PSPO, which covers the behaviours relating to drinking alcohol, items left, begging, spitting, urinating and defecating in designated areas. I proposed the original Public Space Protection Order on the 2nd of February 2017 to help address current ASB issues of street drinking, outdoor sleeping in key areas of West Bridgford, Edwalton and Gamston, which was approved with requirements of a 3-year review. It has been reviewed in 2019 and again in 2022. Our PSPO is not intended as an instant or heavy-handed prosecution means, but as an additional enforcement tool in encouraging persons undertaking certain behaviours to cease or leave an area under this criteria. There's a detrimental effect on the quality of life of those in their locality, are persistent in continuing in nature, are unreasonable and justify the restrictions imposed. This has been very effective in doing that since its introduction with the use of the 4E approach, which is engage, explain, encourage before enforcement. This is backed up in the fact that no fixed penalty tickets have ever needed to be issued, with communication by the police and Rushcliffe's delegated officers and the potential of having a financial penalty being so effective. The review allows for the order to be kept current to new legislation and dynamic in its measures to focus on the most relevant problems affecting the areas as designated in Appendix 3. There are no changes proposed to these areas. The current controls are listed in 4.3, and the recommendation is that we remove 3 of these controls as they're now covered by new legislation and have been assessed by the crime data, and with consultation and thanks with a neighbourhood police inspector, Tim Cuthbert, and the continuing engagement from his team. The 3 we're looking to remove are refusal to remove any items left or believed to be left on land when required to do so by an authorised officer. This is for ethical reasons and can be addressed by new legislation. Second was prohibition of begging for money or for any other items, whether expressively or implied, in a manner that causes or is likely to cause nuisance, annoyance, fear or distress to any other person. That's now covered by changes in the Vagrancy Act. And the third one is prohibition on spitting, urinating or defecating on land or street furniture. We removed that because there's no justification, as there's no evidence for that over the last few years. A public consultation was held between the 8th of August and the 5th of September, which received 110 responses and 50 written comments. A summary is in Appendix 2. There was overwhelming support to the renewal being proposed. The PSPO is an effective deterrent to specific ASB problems in specific areas. I consider this is a valid and proportionate order to remain in place, and the review keeps its evidence-based and intelligence-led for the benefits of community safety for our residents and visitors, and relate to the council's continued work in confirmation of Rushcliffe's strapline. It's a great place and a great lifestyle. The implementation costs will be negligible and will be contained within existing budgets. It is proposed that the revised PSPO will take effect immediately on the 9th of December 2025. So I therefore make the recommendation in part 9 of the report that Cabinet approve the amended Public Space Protection Order, General ASB, as set out in Appendix 1 to take effect from the 9th of December 2025. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Inglis. Seconder, please, Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, Councillor Inglis has covered the detail really, but just to add that this has been very effective over the time that it's been in place, and I know that police, local police and officers of the council have worked very well together to ensure that it's had the right impact, and it was particularly important and useful during COVID. It's right that we update as legislation changes and make sure that anything we put in place is proportionate and addresses the issues that are prevalent in a particular area. We know there's been strong support from the public during consultation to maintaining this and updating it, so I'm very pleased to second the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Any questions, comments, please? I think it's all pretty straightforward, really. So recommendation on page 7 has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please. Unanimous. Thank you. But move on to item 7, which is a bit more of a meaty document. So this is the developer contribution supplementary planning document, and I'll turn to Councillor Upton, please.
Thank you again, Chairman. The 2004 Planning and Compensation Act empowers local planning authorities to prepare local plans and supplementary planning documents, or SPDs. SPDs are not part of the local plan, but are capable of being a material consideration in planning application decisions. The current developer requirements SPD was adopted back in 2003 and is now largely outdated. And this report proposes its revocation and its replacement with a new SPD. The purpose of this developer contribution SPD is to provide information about the provision and/or contribution towards infrastructure required to support the delivery of new developments. It identifies when infrastructure provision, including contributions to a provision, will be sought and secured through planning conditions and planning obligations, and the revised draft SPD is given in detail at Appendix 1. This SPD aims to give developers a better understanding of this council's expectations and priorities regarding planning obligation requirements from the start of a project, and hopefully this will reduce the time taken to negotiate with developers their contributions. Various drafts of this SPD have been considered by our local development framework group this year, and it's been out to public consultation. A total of 17 consultees responded, and their comments are provided in Appendix 2. And some of these comments have resulted in modifications to the draft SPD. The LDF group has supported these revisions and recommended that Cabinet should adopt this draft SPD. Therefore, Chairman, I recommend that Cabinet adopt the recommendations as set out in item 2 of the report, namely support the proposed revisions to the draft developer contribution supplementary planning document. B, approves the adoption of the developer contribution supplementary planning document. C, delegates authority to the Director, Development and Economic Growth in consultation with the Cabinet portfolio holder for planning and housing to make any necessary final minor textual, graphical and presentational changes required to the SPD prior to publication. And finally, D, revokes the developer requirements supplementary planning guidance that was adopted in December 2003. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seconder, Councillor Wheeler.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So, Councillor Upton's gone through quite a bit of detail there, and I know it's gone through the group already, and obviously welcome the amount of residents who have fed back. I think for me, two bits really. One, I do welcome the modification. I think it's on point 3.44 with the more clarification for parish and town councils who might take on these parcels of land which they're expected to. Obviously, it's really crucial that those parish town councils have the support and involved at the very early stage, so that if they are going to take the land on, that they know what they take on and they've been able to influence that to potentially reduce costs down the line for any modifications they want to do. And we should be encouraging sort of town and parish councils to take on this land when appropriate. Those for me with the whole contributions is that the biggest concern I have from residents when they're about to talk about new developments is that they want to make sure the infrastructure is there. You know, they're worried they're not going to be able to get a school place, not going to get the doctors, but etc. So although we do what we can, what's really important, I think, is the government to look at with their new policy about wanting to build more houses and to let's just say change or lighten legislation to enable more house building. They've got to make sure that there's enough provision in place that we can have the infrastructure, because we can only do so much based on the national guidance and policy in place. Because if we don't make sure that the infrastructure is there, not only do we not bring residents with us who potentially want to have that house or live nearby, that can put huge strain on the existing infrastructure that's already there. So really welcome document to there. Obviously there might be more that needs doing, but we need that support from government if we're going to do more going forwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So any other questions or comments? I just echo those comments that it is important that developments do have those supporting facilities, whether it's infrastructure or other facilities. So it is vitally important that we make sure those do happen and go along with developments. If there are no other questions or comments, then has been moved and seconded. Recommendations in paragraph 2 on page 55. All those in favour, please. Unanimous. Thank you. Moving to item 8, which is the Rushcliffe Nature Conservation Strategy on page 143. Turn back to Councillor English, please.
Thank you. So this report presents the updated Rushcliffe Nature Conservation Strategy for 2026 to 2030. A decision is required to whether the new strategy meets the needs of the council and whether the council should adopt this strategy. The community-based nature conservation strategy was first produced in 2003 and then updated in 2010, 2015 and 2020, and these were all adopted by the council. The current adopted nature conservation strategy aims to protect and enhance nature conservation in Rushcliffe. help mitigate the effects of climate change on wildlife and provide public access to wildlife-rich green spaces. It has been developed by the excellent work and expert knowledge by members from the nature conservation groups, community groups, parish councils and other interested bodies, all come together in a partnership group, the Rushcliffe Nature Conservation Strategy Implementation Group, say that quickly, the RNC SIG, led by Rushcliffe Borough Council and Nottingham Wildlife Trust. The emphasis and the items covered are detailed in 4.4 and 4.5 of the report, reflecting the characteristics, the main habitats and the important areas within the borough. The key commitment words being used to raise awareness, protect, enhance, expand, manage, support, create, promote, engage by appropriate management and meet new targets in the creation of habitats and carbon offsetting for the 26-2030 strategy. The cost of the supporting strategy are captured within the Council's medium-term financial strategy. As such, no additional resource requires approval as part of this report. A budget of £127,400 has been allocated for the 5-year period, 26 to 30, to support tree protection and promotion and wildflower planting in Rushcliffe. This will enable the continued delivery of the brilliant Rushcliffe Free Tree Scheme, Community Tree Scheme and Wildlife Seed Scheme. I will quote from the foreword of the strategy. The Environment Agency and Nottingham City Council produced environmental scorecards for Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire in 2023. The environmental inequalities section of the scorecard provides a matrix of environmental inequality indicators for the breadth and protection of plants and animals. Rushcliffe scored 295. The higher the score, the worse the result. And this is the worst score in Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire, with an average score across Nottinghamshire of 209, and the best score in Nottinghamshire with a score of 152 for Ashfield District. The reason for poor biodiversity, however, is due to the success of the borough in its farm production, leading to a long history of intensive agriculture. But we cannot ignore these inequalities. We must be committed. We need to be doing everything possible to address this statement. This report is a big part of that process, and I have no hesitation in recommending that the Cabinet approve the adoption of the Rushcliffe Nature Conservation Strategy 2026 to 2030 as a strategy of the Council as in part 9 of the report. I'll also take the opportunity to have the fantastic work and dedication to be recognised from our environmental officers, Paul Phillips and Sandrina Vicicolo Daniels, and all the RNC SIG team in ensuring we have such a detailed strategy to take forward. And I'm sure that our local wildlife will also endorse it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seconder, Councillor Upton.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm very pleased to second this Rushcliffe Nature Conservation Strategy for the next 5 years. Because of its history of intensive agriculture and especially arable farming, Rushcliffe Borough has a relatively poor level of biodiversity. And we have, and I think must continue to take a strong measures to address this. And the climate change, which is currently manifesting itself around the UK as I speak. I mean, a recent example of this comes to my mind, which is our recent purchase of land at Upper Broughton for some extensive tree planting and enhanced biodiversity in that area as part of our carbon reduction measures. So yes, I do believe this strategy will help us with these challenges of increasing biodiversity and reducing our carbon emissions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? I think it's interesting what Councillor Inglis said. Rushcliffe is certainly an extremely nice countryside, agricultural countryside to view, but other work has to come with that as well. Any other questions or comments? No. So it has been moved and seconded on page 143. All those in favour, please. Unanimous. Thank you. Turn now to page 185 and to the Greater Nottingham Strategic Plan. And I'll turn back again to Councillor Upton. Far away.
Singing from my supper tonight. Well, here we are again, one could say. But Chairman, if I could just preface my comments firstly by saying, especially for our wider audience that's online this evening, this is all about the Greater Nottingham Strategic Plan, quite a large geographical area, and this has been prepared jointly, and I stress jointly, by Broxtowe Borough Council, the City of Nottingham Council, and ourselves here at Rushcliffe for the Greater Nottingham area. I've been here several times before on this long journey, and this is yet another milestone. This really is reflecting the position where we've earlier in the year debated about this draft local plan. We've been out to public consultation, all of us in the joint group of the three councils I mentioned, and we've assessed the feedback and made some modifications here, and I'll discuss that in a few minutes. But it is a wide area, Greater Nottingham Strategic Plan. It's a statutory requirement as set out in the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004 for the council to have an up-to-date local plan, and the plan must be reviewed at least once every 5 years from its adoption date. And this is why the three of us are three councils are taking this report to their respective councils, and that's why we're here this evening before we move it on to the government for inspection. This report, as I say, is a milestone on a fairly long journey of getting a new Greater Nottingham Strategic Plan adopted. It runs to just over 1,000 pages, but I don't propose to go through all of those in detail this evening. It's got to be examined by a planning inspector or inspectors appointed by the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government before it can be adopted as part of the statutory development plan. Failure to review and replace our current local plan part 1 would eventually result in the borough not having an up-to-date development plan, and the absence of this would probably increase the risk of speculative, unplanned development in Rushcliffe, which we have experienced some years back. And this also could weaken the council's ability to effectively deal with all planning applications. So that's the crux of having a good local plan, which, as I say, is part of the Greater Nottingham Strategic Plan. The report here tonight has essentially two main topics. Firstly, to consider the modifications to the draft plan, many of which were raised by consultees as part of the public consultation I referred to. And secondly, changes to the text of the plan to reflect the withdrawal of Gedling Borough Council from the joint partnership some months ago, and that is effectively a legal requirement. So once adopted, this strategic plan will replace the current plan part 1 core strategy, which we started and adopted back in 2014 for ourselves. The modifications which I refer to largely reflect points made by consultees, and we will suggest these to the inspector or inspectors during their consideration and examination of the plan. We aim to submit this plan and the policies map changes document that goes with it, all the supporting documents, all the representations from the public examination later this month. And that is the aim of the other two councils. This will begin the examination process by an independent planning inspector or inspectors who will consider the plan, the representations, and test it for soundness and legal compliance. And if found sound, the plan will then be ready for adoption by this our full council. I would hope sometime around December 2026. As I said earlier, it is quite a long journey that we are travelling on, but that's the way it is. The second part of the report is, as reported to full council in March this year, Gedling Borough Council is no longer part of the partnership preparing the Greater Nottingham Strategic Plan, and this revised draft therefore covers the three councils I referred to. we've had to take out all references, or believe we've taken out all references and policies referring to the Gedlin Borough, and it's considered that the core objectives, policies and outcomes of this revised draft, excluding Gedlin, are largely now unchanged despite their withdrawal from the joint process. Therefore, Chairman, I recommend to Cabinet this evening to adopt the recommendations as set out in item 2 of the report. Now, they are quite a lengthy, they run to A to C, A to E inclusive. Do you want me to read them all out, or are you going to take them as printed in item 2?
I'm very happy that they are taken as read because they are printed out on the agenda for already, and that's already a public document. So
Thank you.
I'm quite happy about that.
Thank you.
So if I could have a seconder, please, Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, as Councillor Upton has stressed, there's been a huge amount of work to reach this point over a considerable period of time, and we haven't come to the conclusion yet. But it's worth it in as much as it provides us with part of the process for ensuring, as Councillor Upton said, that we have as much control as we possibly can to avoid speculative and unplanned development in Rushcliffe and in the other boroughs in the city. It's really important that we utilise these tools. However drawn out some of the processes may feel, it's extremely crucial that we have these in place to avoid that speculative development and controlled development across our boroughs. As Councillor Upton said, this will now go to an independent planning inspectorate, inspector
as well.
an inspector even, with the requested modifications as outlined in the paper, and that will provide a further opportunity for consultees to raise and discuss specific issues with the inspectors as part of that process. So the consultation with residents and interested parties is not over. There's been plenty of opportunities, and there'll be plenty more opportunities for any issues that people identify to be raised and for them to comment on the content of the document. And hopefully we will get an approved plan at the end of the process, which will enable us to move forward with our planning controls within the borough. So I'm very happy to second the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. As Councillor Upton said, it's a very long and detailed document, but these things are necessary to ensure that everything is covered within such an important document. Do we have other questions or comments? Councillor Wheeler?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think it's really, really important that we emphasise why we're doing this document, and Councillor Upton's covered it as well, is that we have to. You know, at the end of the day, if we do not have this in place, we are open for speculative development. Any of the sites that are currently in the plan, if they are taken out of that plan and we haven't got a similar site or the same site with the same amount of numbers in there, we are fully at risk of that site potentially going straight to appeal and being granted by the Government Secretary of State. And in the day, we as a council obviously took through an item 2, asked for the government to remove housing targets. Obviously they haven't. Obviously we know we've got increased housing targets. So we are effectively being blackmailed to ensure that we have a plan up to date with the amount of houses in there, because if we don't, there's a very high chance, especially with what's been in the press and the been said about housing, that the development could go through. But while we have an element of control still by having this plan in place, means that we do have that. It is also worth saying, I've had residents contact me to say, well, if this goes through tonight, does that mean we're definitely going to have this development happen? It's worth saying on record, no. Also, we have examples where we've had development in the borough, sites in the plan in the borough that have been turned down, both application here and actually successfully defended on appeal. So just because it's in the plan tonight doesn't mean that it's automatically granted. You know, concerns about would have to be met in terms of contamination. If there's land there, we've got to make sure that still developers have to make sure that the sites are suitable development and the infrastructure is in place that we agree, similar to the item we just covered. So it's really important because there's a lot of misconceptions out there, and obviously, and I understand why, because we're close to this, we understand this, we live and breathe it, we have it all the time. And if you are the public who isn't close to this, I can completely understand where we're going to get confused by the various plans. Even we need to struggle and have a stiff drink sometimes to remember which one's which. So really important to have that on record to say that. But this is why I'm just documenting tonight, because it effectively protects these sites to make sure we have that control of it, and the local residents have a say still over those developments and can have their voice heard, which they will be able to if we adopt this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? No. Okay. So the recommendations A, B, C on page 185 and D and E on page 186 have been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please. Unanimous. Thank you. So move to item 10, the Quarter 2 financial report. Councillor Verdi.
Thank you, Chairman. This is the second financial report for the current financial period, 25-26, and I'm pleased to report a relatively positive position. But as we're all aware, and I keep saying this over and over again, there remains much uncertainty around local government finance and the fairer funding review, as well as, of course, local government reorganisation. To add to the challenging environment, the Chancellor delivered the autumn statement recently, and a majority of the relevant announcements from this for the local government and councils was centred around business rates reform and a council tax surcharge. The final settlement won't be due until December, late December, so we'll have more certainty then. But sadly, I'm not anticipating anything positive from that, and it's unlikely to increase government. The government is unlikely to spend increased spending power for us. Specifically for this report, I report on the revenue and capital position. We've achieved an overall budget efficiency position of £0.810 million, and Table 1 and Appendix B gives the reasons for the main variances. As shown in Table 1, largely this is due to not requiring budget contingencies. For example, the National Pay Award being lower than anticipated, and also our development at Fareham, refuse collection salaries not being required yet. So that's helped. In addition, government grants have been awarded and received during this year relating to new burdens, for example, the asylum dispersal areas, and these weren't budgeted for, so that's increased some of the revenues. And Appendix A shows proposals to earmark some of all of this for additional cost pressures, including LGR and simple recycling, which I've mentioned before. Appendix F shows a projected overspend on the special expense, which is worth highlighting. It's a moderate amount of £19,000, and the reasons for this is commented within paragraph 4.7 within the report. But it's primarily due to Bridgeford Park and improvements to West Park, which I actually highlighted in Q1 when I presented that report. There are further comments within paragraphs 4.9 to 4.12, which give further reasons for some of the financial pressures and performance. Inflation remains a risk for us, as it does for residents and businesses, and increasing the cost of living, I think, for all of us. In particular, I think the national insurance increases, which were recently announced by this government, are also causing concern for employers, including ourselves. On the positive note, interest rates for us are easing gradually, but remain high, relatively high at 4%. This may not be good for us as individuals necessarily, but I think for us as an authority, it's giving us some strong investment returns, which is helping us with our treasury activities. So, and that's also in the context of not having an external borrowing, burdening us with elevated financing costs. And finally, on the revenue side, the transformation and efficiency plans which are underway, which I report on regularly, are on target. We've budgeted for some 824,000 over the year, and we're about halfway through that. So that's going pretty well. Finally, on the capital side, appendices C, D and E of the report show the overall position on the capital programme. There is a projected underspend of some £1.466 million, and Table 2 gives the reasons for this, which is mainly largely due to, for example, a reduction in the Warm Homes external funding. We had an indicative budget of about 750,000 for that, and the actual amount received was 140,000, so that's had quite a big impact on that. We also have some for land acquisition and carbon offsetting, which is uncommitted at Q2, so that's again caused some of the underspend on the capital side. I think in summary, finally, the current position remains broadly healthy. I always say that with caution, stable, with significant variances largely consistent with those that I've already reported at Q1 early this year. The position may change moving forward, of course, with LGR and other uncertainties. I think finally, it's worth noting that our strong reserves position provides the flexibility to manage these risks which we have and continue to invest in services for the benefit of residents. And looking ahead, reserves will be required to address future demand pressures and the uncertainty I've talked about, and potential cost implications, for example, with simple recycling. But overall, a relatively stable position. So I would therefore like to, Chairman, move that Cabinet accept the recommendations contained within Section 2, bullets A to C, which are there. I can read them out if you want, but you probably don't want me to.
That's fine. Thank you very much indeed. Seconder, Councillor Wheeler.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's similar to the message I've said in the previous couple of times. I second this really, which is when you set a budget, you're going on with the information you have at the time. And I think we all know with personal budgets or work, you get unexpected bills, you get unexpected policy change, etc. That can throw you off course slightly. And we've seen there, LGR being the major expenditure really that we didn't account for, wasn't in the manifesto. Obviously we expected to have to deliver, which is take up a lot of time and expense. But the fact that we've always been very careful of the finances we have here, and the fact we've always built that resilience, shows that even with these variances, as Councillor has taken through, we are still in a relatively positive position. That means that we can have those choices that we can make in subsequent years about what we do to spend that money in the most prudent way, that also delivers to our residents and on their priorities. So really welcome the report there, and to say as well to our finance team, it is a real struggle in terms of when you get the unexpected bills in, but also to keep everything, all the plates spinning to make sure that everything adds up still. So we should thank the entire team who spend, like I say, a lot of time and effort into managing these finances and make sure they're in a strong place for us. So more than happy to second, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? Notes, the recommendations have been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please. That's unanimous. Thank you. So move to item 11, and I will move this under Regulations 4 of the Local Authorities Regulations 2012. The public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1, schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. The grounds for those exempt information being it's likely that commercially sensitive information could be divulged. Could I have a seconder, please, Councillor Brennan?
Yes, sorry.
Thank you very much. All those in favour, please. That's unanimous. Thank you very much.